After hosting them for months, I asked my daughter-in-law to help with groceries. She threw a glass and yelled, "You owe us for raising your grandkids." My son sat quietly as she added, "You should be grateful we haven't sent you to home yet." That night I left without a word, but the next week they got a visit from someone who knew exactly what had been happening inside this house. I never thought a simple request for help with groceries would end with glass shattering against my kitchen wall, but there I was, watching the shards scatter across the tiles I had mopped that very morning, my daughter-in-law's face twisted in rage as she screamed that I owed them everything. "You owe us." Maribel's voice cracked with fury, her finger jabbing toward my face like a weapon. "You owe us for raising your grandkids. You should be grateful we haven't sent you to home yet." I stood there gripping the counter, my hands trembling despite my best efforts to keep them steady, and all I could think was that I had only asked for $20 to help cover the groceries that fed all 7 of us living under my roof, the roof I had worked 2 jobs to keep over our heads after my husband died 15 years ago. I am Elena Santos, 68 years old, and I have always believed that being a good mother, a good grandmother, meant enduring quietly, meant swallowing down every hurt and disappointment because family is supposed to stick together no matter what. But somewhere along the way my patience had calcified into something brittle and breakable, stretched so thin by months of disrespect that I refused to acknowledge even to myself. I have a terrible habit of making excuses for people I love, of convincing myself that tomorrow will be better, that I am being too sensitive, that I should be more understanding, and this weakness of mine had allowed my son and his wife to move into my home with their 3 children 6 months ago, when they claimed they needed just a few weeks to get back on their feet. But those weeks had stretched into months, and my savings had dwindled to almost nothing, while they contributed exactly $0 to our household expenses. "Daniel," I turned to my son, my voice barely holding together, searching his face for any sign that he would defend me, that he would tell his wife she had gone too far, but he just sat frozen at the kitchen table staring at the salt shaker like it held the secrets of the universe. He said nothing, and that silence cut deeper than any of Maribel's screaming ever could because this was my boy, the child I had sacrificed everything for, and he could not even meet my eyes. I felt something inside me crack that night, something that had been bending for months under the weight of constant demands and careless cruelty, and I realized with sudden clarity that I had taught my son through my own weakness that it was acceptable to let the women in his life be treated like servants, that silence in the face of injustice was somehow noble rather than cowardly. That night after everyone had gone to bed, after I had swept up the broken glass and wiped down the wall and pretended that everything was fine just like I always did, I packed a single bag with my medications, a change of clothes, and the few photographs I could not bear to leave behind. I did not write a note because what was there to say that I had not already said 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways while being ignored? I did not say goodbye because goodbyes implied I might come back, and I knew with bone-deep certainty that if I walked out that door I could never return to this life of being taken for granted and verbally abused in my own home. As I stepped out into the darkness, the cool night air hitting my face like a baptism, my phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I looked at the screen I saw a message from a number I recognized immediately. "I've seen enough," it read. "It's time." I did not reply because Teresa Velez already knew everything she needed to know. For the first time in 6 months, I slept without my shoulders hunched up around my ears, without waking every hour worried that I would hear crying children or fighting adults or some new catastrophe that required my immediate attention and my rapidly depleting bank account. I had checked into a modest boarding house across town, the kind of place with floral wallpaper that had been there since the 1970s and creaky floors that groaned under my footsteps, but it was clean and quiet, and most importantly it was mine, a space where no one demanded anything from me or made me feel like a burden in my own existence. I spent that first morning sitting on the narrow bed, replaying every moment I had dismissed as not that bad, every insult I had softened in my memory, every boundary I had allowed to be trampled, because I did not want to cause conflict or seem ungrateful that my son was even willing to live with me at all. My restraint had not been kindness like I had told myself, it had been permission, tacit approval for them to treat me however they wanted because I would never push back, never demand better, never leave no matter how bad things became. I have always been too forgiving, too quick to make excuses, too willing to sacrifice my own well-being for the sake of keeping peace, and this character flaw of mine had cost me dearly over the years in relationships where I accepted crumbs and called it a feast. Meanwhile, back at my house, Daniel and Maribel assumed I would return within a day or two like I always did after our arguments, my tail between my legs and an apology on my lips for having caused trouble. "She always does," Maribel said to Daniel over breakfast, confident in her assessment of my weakness. "She'll be back by tomorrow, you watch. She can't survive without us." But I did not come back. not that day or the next or the one after that, and I did not answer their calls or respond to their increasingly frantic text messages asking where I was and when I planned to return because they needed me to watch the kids while Maribel went to get her nails done. Instead, I met with Teresa Velez at the community center, where I had been volunteering on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, helping to serve meals to seniors who were even more isolated than I was, and Teresa had noticed things about me that I thought I had hidden so well. She had noticed the bruise on my forearm that I claimed came from bumping into a doorframe, but that was actually from Maribel grabbing me too hard when she wanted my attention. She had noticed the way I flinched when my phone rang and how I would step outside to take calls from my son, my voice getting smaller and smaller as the conversation progressed. She had noticed the hesitation when I spoke about my living situation, the way I minimized everything and made excuses for behavior that no one should have to tolerate. "Elena, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me," Teresa said as we sat in her office, a cramped space filled with filing cabinets and motivational posters that had seen better days. "Are you safe at home?" I opened my mouth to say yes, of course I was safe. I was being dramatic. Things were not that bad, but instead what came out was the truth, tumbling out of me like water from a broken dam, and once I started talking I could not stop. I told her everything, about the months of financial abuse where my pension checks went straight into their account to pay for their car payment, and their credit card bills, while I ate rice and beans for dinner. I told her about the emotional manipulation, the constant reminders that I should be grateful they were willing to live with me and take care of me in my old age, as if I was some decrepit invalid rather than a woman who still worked part-time at the library and volunteered twice a week. I told her about the night Maribel threw the glass at the wall and screamed at me, about my son's silence, about the crushing loneliness of being surrounded by family who made me feel more alone than I had ever felt as a widow. "We need to document everything," Teresa said, her voice calm and methodical, pulling out a yellow legal pad and a pen. "Financial records, messages, anything that shows a pattern of exploitation. Do you have access to your bank statements?" I did, because I am meticulous about record keeping even when I am being taken advantage of. Some ingrained habit from my years of making every dollar stretch to cover Daniel's school supplies and soccer fees and eventually college tuition that I paid for by working double shifts at the hospital, where I cleaned rooms and emptied bedpans. Together we went through months of transactions, highlighting every transfer to Maribel and Daniel's account, every charge for things that had nothing to do with household expenses, but everything to do with maintaining their lifestyle while I went without basic necessities. We documented the messages, the ones where Maribel demanded money for various emergencies that never quite materialized into actual bills, the ones where she guilted me about being selfish for wanting to keep any of my own pension for myself. Teresa also spoke to my neighbors, people I had lived next to for 20 years who had witnessed the gradual deterioration of my situation, but had not known how to help, or if help would even be welcomed. "Mrs. Alvarez next door heard the fight that night," Teresa told me, making notes on her pad. "She said it wasn't the first time she'd heard yelling coming from your house. She's willing to make a statement if needed." I felt shame wash over me, hot and prickly, because I had tried so hard to maintain the facade that everything was fine, that we were just a normal multi-generational household making it work, and now I had to confront the reality that everyone knew the truth anyway. Still, even with all this evidence laid out in front of me in black and white and highlighted yellow, I hesitated when Teresa suggested we take the next step. "They're my family," I murmured, my stubborn loyalty rearing its head even now, even after everything. "I can't just destroy their lives." Teresa did not argue with me or try to convince me that I was wrong to feel conflicted. She simply said, "Then let the truth decide what happens next. All we're doing is presenting the facts to people who can help. What happens after that is up to them." A week later there was a knock at the door of my house. The house that legally belonged to me, though Maribel had started talking about putting it on the market to get something bigger and newer, as if my opinion on selling my own home was irrelevant. Maribel opened the door with irritation already etched on her face, probably expecting it to be another delivery person, or maybe one of the neighbors complaining about the kids playing too loudly in the yard. But instead she found herself face to face with two officials in business casual attire and Teresa standing calmly behind them. "Good morning," one of them said, a man in his mid-40s with kind eyes and an official badge clipped to his belt. "I'm Mr. Alvarez with Adult Protective Services, and this is Ms. Chen from the Financial Crimes Unit. We're here regarding a report of financial exploitation and elder abuse." Maribel laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief, too quickly and too loudly. "That's ridiculous. Who would even say something like that?" Daniel appeared behind her, his face going pale as he took in the scene at the door. "There must be a mistake. We take care of my mother. We live with her to make sure she's okay." "May we come in?" Mr. Alvarez asked, And it was not really a question because they were already stepping across the threshold into the foyer, where I had hung family photos from happier times. We have some questions about Mrs. Santos's financial situation and her living conditions. I was not there to witness what happened next because I was sitting in Teresa's car parked down the street, my hands folded tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking, but Teresa filled me in later on all the details. They walked through the house doing a visual inspection, noting that the master bedroom where I should have been sleeping had been taken over by Maribel and Daniel, while I had been relegated to a small room that was barely bigger than a closet, the room that used to be Daniel's childhood bedroom, but that now felt like a prison cell. They asked to see financial documents, which Maribel tried to refuse, until Ms. Chen explained calmly that they could do this the easy way with cooperation, or the hard way with warrants and investigations. They pulled up bank records on the dining room table, the same table where I had served countless dinners that Maribel complained about because I had not made her favorite dish or had not seasoned something correctly. You transferred funds from her account repeatedly, Ms. Chen noted, her finger tracing down a printout of transactions. $700 here, $500 there, multiple smaller amounts almost weekly. Can you explain what these were for? Maribel's jaw tightened. She let us use her account. She wanted to help us get back on our feet. It's not illegal to accept help from family. Ms. Chen looked up from the papers, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. Did she consent to these specific transfers? Do you have written authorization? Maribel floundered, looking to Daniel for support, but my son had gone silent again, staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. She gave us her debit card. That's consent. Teresa spoke up then, her voice cutting through the defensive bluster. Did she, or did you take it? The room went quiet except for the ticking of the clock on the wall, the same clock that had marked time in that house for 30 years. We have testimony from Mrs. Santos stating that she felt pressured and coerced into providing financial support. We also have documentation showing that her pension deposits were being automatically transferred without her explicit authorization for each transaction. Daniel finally found his voice, weak and trembling. Mom said it was okay. She said we could stay here and she would help us. Mr. Alvarez pulled out a small notebook. When was the last time you contributed to household expenses? Groceries, utilities, anything? Daniel and Maribel exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. We help out, Maribel insisted. We take care of the kids, we do chores, that's worth something. Ms. Chen made a note on her paperwork. Financial contribution is different from domestic labor. Mrs. Santos owns this home. She pays the mortgage, the utilities, the property taxes. She also purchases groceries to feed 7 people on a fixed income. Can you tell me what percentage of those costs you've covered in the last 6 months? Silence. The damning, heavy silence that answered the question more clearly than any words could have. According to her bank statements, exactly 0%. In fact, the flow of money has been entirely one direction, from her accounts to yours. Maribel's face flushed red with anger and humiliation. This is ridiculous. She's our family. We're not exploiting her. We're living together like families do. Mr. Alvarez remained calm, unmoved by the outburst. Mrs. Santos has reported feeling unsafe in her own home. She's reported verbal abuse, financial coercion, and emotional manipulation. These are serious allegations. Daniel looked like he might be sick. Where is she? Can I talk to her? This is all a misunderstanding. Teresa shook her head. She's safe, and that's all you need to know right now. She'll reach out if and when she's ready. What happened over the next few hours was a systematic dismantling of the life Maribel and Daniel had built on my generosity and my weakness. The automatic transfers were stopped immediately, my accounts were frozen to prevent further unauthorized access, and Mr. Alvarez explained in clear terms that they would be opening an investigation into potential financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. But she's not vulnerable, Maribel protested. She's fine, she goes to work, she volunteers, she's perfectly capable. Ms. Chen looked at her with something like pity. Vulnerability isn't just about physical or mental capacity. It's also about power dynamics, emotional manipulation, and financial control. Your mother-in-law is 68 years old, living on a fixed income, and by her own testimony, she felt she couldn't say no to your requests for money because you had convinced her she owed you for the privilege of your presence. By evening, the house no longer felt like theirs. Maribel told me later through angry text messages that I read but did not respond to. Every room had been tainted by the presence of officials asking questions and taking notes, by the implication that they were abusers rather than family members just trying to make ends meet. By the next morning, neither did their certainty, that unshakable confidence that I would always be there to bail them out, to sacrifice my own well-being for theirs, to accept whatever treatment they dished out because I loved them too much to protect myself. I did not watch the confrontation unfold because I could not bear to see my son's face when he realized what was happening, when he understood that his silence had finally cost him something real. I sat on a quiet bench outside the community center, hands folded neatly in my lap, watching birds hop along the sidewalk searching for crumbs, and I tried to feel something other than exhausted relief. When Teresa returned hours later, she simply nodded at me. "It's done," she said, settling onto the bench beside me with a heavy sigh. "They know the investigation is proceeding. They've been informed that if Mrs. Santos chooses to press charges for financial exploitation, there could be criminal consequences." I exhaled a long, slow breath that seemed to carry 6 months of tension out of my body. "What happens now?" Teresa pulled out her phone, scrolling through notes. "Now you decide what you want. Do you want to go back to that house? Do you want them to leave? Do you want to pursue legal action? This is your choice, Alina. For the first time in a long time, you get to decide what happens next." The weight of that freedom felt almost crushing because I had spent so long letting other people make decisions for me, convincing myself that being accommodating and flexible was the same as being loving, that I had forgotten how to advocate for my own needs and desires. "I want them out of my house," I heard myself say, surprised by the firmness in my voice. "I want my home back. I want to be able to walk into my own kitchen without wondering if someone is going to scream at me for asking them to contribute. I want to sleep in my own bedroom. I want my life back." Teresa squeezed my hand. "Then that's what we'll make happen." The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and uncomfortable conversations conducted through mediators, because I still could not bring myself to face Daniel directly, my stubborn maternal instinct to protect him warring with my newfound determination to protect myself. Marable fought the eviction notice tooth and nail, claiming they had nowhere to go, that I was a cruel, heartless woman who was abandoning my own grandchildren, that she would make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. "Let her talk," Teresa advised when I showed her the barrage of text messages and social media posts painting me as a villain. "The truth is documented. Anyone who matters will see through the manipulation." Daniel sent me letters, actual handwritten letters delivered to the boarding house through some method I never quite figured out, and these were harder to dismiss because they were full of genuine remorse that might have been sincere or might have been performative desperation. "Mom, I'm sorry," one read in his familiar scrawl. "I should have stood up for you. I should have told Marable she was wrong. I was weak and I let you down and I don't know how to fix this, but please can we talk?" I folded each letter carefully and placed them in a box under my bed, unable to throw them away but equally unable to respond, because what could I say that would change anything? Sorry does not refill a bank account, does not erase months of verbal abuse, does not undo the fundamental breach of trust that occurred when my own son watched his wife throw glass at walls and scream at me and said nothing. By the end of the month they were out, gone with their belongings packed into a moving truck, headed to Marable's mother's house 3 states away. And I stood in the doorway of my home, watching them leave without saying goodbye, because I did not trust myself to speak without crying or worse, without apologizing for enforcing my own boundaries. The house felt enormous and empty, without 7 people filling it with noise and chaos and constant demands, but it also felt like mine again, like a space I could breathe in without permission. I spent the first week just walking through rooms, reacquainting myself with the home I had worked so hard to maintain, moving my belongings back into the master bedroom where they belonged, cooking meals for one that I ate slowly, without anyone complaining about my cooking. But as I settled into this new quiet life, trying to find a rhythm that felt normal again, my phone buzzed with a new message from Daniel, and when I opened it, my hands started trembling again for the first time since I had left. "I told them everything," the message read, and I could feel my pulse quicken with confusion and something like dread. "But there's something you don't know. She wasn't the one who started it, it was me." I stared at those words, reading them over and over, trying to make sense of what he was telling me. Another message came through before I could formulate a response. "I convinced Marable we should move in with you. I told her you had plenty of money saved up and you'd want to help us. I'm the one who set up the automatic transfers from your account. I told her you said it was okay. Mom, I'm so sorry. I let you blame her for everything when it was mostly me all along." The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the kitchen floor, the same kitchen where this had all started with a simple request for grocery money and a thrown glass. I thought I had been fighting against my daughter-in-law's entitlement and cruelty, thought the enemy was clear and the battle lines drawn, but now I had to confront the possibility that my own son, the child I had sacrificed everything for, had orchestrated his own mother's financial exploitation, and then hidden behind his wife's volatility to avoid accountability. "Why are you telling me this now?" I typed back with shaking fingers after I picked up the phone. The response came quickly. "Because Marable left me. She found out I'd been lying to her too, about how much money we'd taken from you, about what you'd actually agreed to. She said she wasn't going to be the villain in my story anymore. She took the kids and went to her mother's and filed for divorce. Mom, I've lost everything and it's my own fault and I don't know what to do." I sat down hard on one of the kitchen chairs, the same chairs where Daniel had sat in silence while Marable screamed at me, and I tried to process this new information that recontextualized everything I thought I knew about the last 6 months. Part of me wanted to call him immediately, to comfort him the way I always had when he was hurting, to tell him it would be okay and we would figure it out together. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger during my weeks away from home, the part that had learned to prioritize my own well-being over my ingrained need to sacrifice for others, that part knew that this was not my problem to solve. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I typed carefully, choosing each word with deliberate precision, "but I can't be the person you come to for rescue anymore. You made choices that hurt me deeply, that violated my trust in ways I'm still trying to recover from. I hope you get help and figure out how to be better, but I can't be part of that process right now. I need to focus on healing myself." I sent the message before I could second-guess myself, before my old patterns of enabling and excusing could kick in, and then I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet of my kitchen listening to the clock tick. There was no satisfaction in any of this, no triumph in watching my son's life fall apart even though he deserved consequences for his actions. There was only a deep bone-tired sadness, and the recognition that sometimes loving someone means letting them face the results of their own choices without swooping in to soften the blow. I had spent a lifetime believing that love meant staying, meant enduring, meant accepting whatever scraps of affection and respect people were willing to offer me, but now I understood that love also meant leaving when staying would destroy you, meant enforcing boundaries even when it hurt, meant choosing yourself when everyone else expected you to choose them. The revenge I had wanted was not the dramatic confrontation or the legal consequences or the public exposure of wrongdoing. It was simply this: reclaiming my life, my home, my right to exist without apology or justification, and the quiet knowledge that I had finally learned to value myself enough to walk away from people who did not value me no matter how much I loved them, or how badly I wanted to fix them, or how guilty I felt for prioritizing my own needs.